Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel gsipucmysuru. This is the second session of the 7th chapter, that is wireless communication. In the first session, we discussed about the basic electronic communication system, that is the block diagram of electronic communication system, which contained the source, transmitter, channel, receiver, destination, and in the channel we had got what is called as noise. So this is the simple block diagram of a electronic communication system. After that, we discussed about what is an EM wave, that is electromagnetic wave, which is also called as the radio waves, and the different frequency bands which is used in different applications, and what are those frequency bands are called as, like very low frequency, medium frequency, high frequency, ಈ ಥರ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ಸ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಬೇರೆ ಬ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಫ್ರೀಕ್ವೆನ್ಸಿ ನೇಮ್ಸನ್ನು ನಾವು ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸೆಷನಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಈಗ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಡಿಸ್ಕಸ್ಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ವಾಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಕಾಲ್ಡ್ as propagation. Propagation is nothing but forward travel of the radio waves is called as propagation. I mean to say, radio waves ಒಂದು ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಕಡೆಗೆ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ it has to travel in one path. So that forward travel of that radio waves itself is called as propagation. But these radio waves are having three different paths for propagation. They are the ground waves, space waves, and sky waves. So these are the different paths through which the radio waves are transmitted from one place to another place. That is the ground waves, the space waves, and the sky waves. Depending upon the frequency of the signal we are handling with, depending upon the frequency of the signal what we are required to transmit from one place to another place, we are going to select one of these three types of propagation, that is the ground, space, and the sky waves. Before coming into this ground waves, space waves, or sky waves, let us come into the topic what is called as the troposphere. In your school level, you have learnt about the different layers of atmosphere, like troposphere, stratosphere, ionosphere, athara bere bere taradanta layers of atmosphere na nodidvi. If I am going to consider this as the earth, the very first layer which is lying above the earth is called as the troposphere. Troposphere is nothing but a layer which lies above the earth, just above the earth, which contains 70% of the gaseous matter, 70% of the gaseous matter, and moisture, wind, as well as the dust particles. So this troposphere is nothing but the layer which is present just immediately above the earth. That is, the immediate layer above the earth is called as the troposphere, which contains 70% of the gaseous mass, that can either be the carbon dioxide irbodu, oxygen irbodu, all such kinds of gaseous mass is present. Along with that, we are also having the moisture as well as the dust particles and the wind exist in this first layer, which is called as the troposphere. Now let us try to understand what is called as this ground waves. Ground waves, the name itself is specifying, waves are transmitted with the help of the ground, that is the surface of the earth anta. So what exactly is the meaning of this ground waves? Ground waves are nothing but the radio waves that are transmitted along or reflected from the surface of the earth. If we are going to consider this as the surface of the earth, and here we are having antenna anta heladre, the signal will be transmitted from the antenna to the other medium or to the other antenna like this. We require antennas for both transmitting as well as receiving. This is the earth layer. The antenna, the receiving antenna, will receive the signal which is transmitted from a different antenna, what is called as the transmitting antenna. So on both the sides we require antenna. That is, even our mobile phone will be having antennas. In the earlier days, radio system anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ radio system ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಒಂದು stick ತರ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. If you are going to extend that particular stick, then a particular FM station or a particular radio station was captured with the help of that antenna. We are going going to call that antenna. And television anta bandaga, TV anta bandaga, in the earlier days we were having antenna which was like this structures, bar like structure irtaittu. But now in these days we are not using this kind of antennas. We are using dish antennas. Dish antenna antandage estondu bere company antennas ide, we are going to use that. So antennas are very much essential in order to transmit the signal as well as in order to capture the signal or receive the signal. So ground waves are nothing but the radio waves which are transmitted along the surface of the earth or reflected from the surface of the earth. Reflected from the surface of the earth anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ ನನಗೆ ಈ ತರ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. These ground waves are used to transmit the low frequency and the medium frequency band signals. Last session alli ನಾವು low frequency band signals band ಯಾವ್ದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ತನಕ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, medium frequency band ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದರದ್ದು frequency range ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. So all those signals which lie under this low frequency and the medium frequency band can use this ground wave propagation. These ground waves use earth as the transmission line. Earth as the transmission line. Like ನಾನು ಆವಾಗಲೇ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಿ last session ಅಲ್ಲಿ, the signals can be transferred from one place to another place with the help of a wire, that is the transmission lines, wired transmission line, or ವೈರ್ಲೆಸ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾನು ಸಿಗ್ನಲ್ಸ್ನ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಸ್ಯಾಟಲೈಟ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಷನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಆಪ್ಟಿಕಲ್ ಫೈಬರ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಲೈನ್ ಅಂತ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾವುದೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅಥವಾ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಮೀಡಿಯಮ್ ಅಂತ ಯಾವುದು ಬೇರೆದಿಲ್ಲ. ಹಿಯರ್ ದ ಅರ್ತ್ ಲೇಯರ್ ಇಟ್ ಸೆಲ್ಫ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ಡ್ ಆಸ್ ದ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಲೈನ್ ಥ್ರೂ ವಿಚ್ ದ ಸಿಗ್ನಲ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಟೆಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಒನ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್ ಟು ಅನದರ್ ಪ್ಲೇಸ್. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ವೇವ್ಸ್ conductivity will increase in the damped region. Damped region ಅಥವಾ wet ಇರುವಂತ region ನಲ್ಲಿ the conductivity of these ground waves increases. So the conductivity of these ground waves increases ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ the signals can be transmitted in a easier manner where there is wetness or the region is damped. The meaning is same. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ this ground wave propagation is used in marine communication. Marine communication ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ, that is we are going to use these ground waves in order to send the signal from ship to shore or shore to ship. ಶಿಪ್ ಇಂದ ಶೋರಿಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ಅಥವಾ ಶೋರ್ ಇಂದ ಶಿಪ್ಪಿಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಇನ್ಫಾರ್ಮೇಶನ್ ಕಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ವೇರ್ ದ ಅರ್ತ್ ಲೇಯರ್ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟರ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಶಿಪ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಇನ್ ದ ವಾಟರ್. ಸೊ ಆ ವಾಟರ್ ಲೇಯರ್ ಇಂದ ನಾವು ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ವೇವ್ಸ್ ತರ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಐ ಮೀನ್ ದ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಷನ್ ಲೈನ್ಸ್ ತರ ತಗೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕಂಡಕ್ಟಿವಿಟಿ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದ ರೀಜನ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆಟ್, ದ ರೀಜನ್ ಇಸ್ ಫಿಲ್ಡ್ ವಿತ್ ವಾಟರ್. ಸೊ ಫಾರ್ ದಿಸ್ marine communication we are going to use this ground wave propagation. The signals can travel from few hundreds to few thousands of kilometers. Few hundred kilometers ಇಂದ ಹಿಡಿದು few thousands of kilometer ತನಕನು ಸಿಗ್ನಲ್ಸ್ನ ನಾನು ಒಂದು ರೀಜನ್ ಇಂದ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ರೀಜನ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಈಸಿಯಾಗಿ with the help of this ground waves transmit ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. But the electrical signals keeps on decreasing. At some point this signal will become electric field of the signal. EM wave anta andre ಏನು ಹೇಳಿದೆ, it is a combination of magnetic wave and an electrical wave. So the electric field of this particular signal decreases as it travels over the earth's surface, because the electric field or the energy will be absorbed by the earth. So ತುಂಬಾ ದೂರ ತನಕ ನಾನು ಸಿಗ್ನಲ್ ಈ ತರ ಹಿಂಗೆ ಟ್ರಾನ್ಸ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ some of the energy will be lost because that energy will be absorbed by the earth. So this is the ground waves. Ground waves are nothing but the radio waves that are transmitted along or reflected from the surface of the earth. Now we'll see the next type of wave, what is called as the space wave. These space waves are also called as line of sight wave. Line of sight wave ಅಂತನೂ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. Here space waves ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, if I am going to consider this as the surface of the earth, this as antenna, two antennas, one is a transmitting antenna, we are going to name that as transmitted, and other one is a receiving antenna, let me name that as the receiver. So the signals can be transferred in two different ways. One is directly from one antenna to the other antenna. let me call that as direct waves. And the other method is using this earth as a transmitting medium. So this wave will be transmitted by reflecting that signal on the surface of the earth, that is reflected wave. So direct waves and the reflected waves together will be called as this space waves, and in this space waves very high frequency signals can be propagated. So space waves are nothing but the direct waves and ground reflected waves together will be called as the space waves, which is also called as the line of sight waves. Clear? What exactly is the meaning of this line of sight? Line of sight refers to maximum distance visible horizontally. Maximum distance visible horizontally ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ we are going to see about the concept what is called as horizon concept. Horizon concept ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ optical horizon ಅಂತ ಇದೆ and radio horizon ಅಂತಾನೂ ಇದೆ. Horizon, optical horizon and the radio horizon. So what is this optical horizon? The maximum distance visible to the naked eye on the surface of the earth is called as optical horizon. Due to the curvature of the earth, we are going to feel that at some point or at some distance earth and the sky are meeting at a far distance, and that distance is called as the optical horizon. What is this radio horizon? Radio signals can travel beyond that optical horizon. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನನ್ನ ಕಣ್ಣಿಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ದೂರ ತನಕ ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೋ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು optical horizon ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. But radio horizon, that is nothing but the signals can be transferred beyond that optical horizon, and this radio horizon is equal to radio horizon is equal to 4/3 of optical horizon. ಇದನ್ನ pictorial representation ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ, if this is the surface of the earth, then if we are having two antennas, one is called the transmitting antenna, the other one is called as the receiving antenna. This is nothing but the space wave propagation. If we are going to stand here and try to see, then the maximum distance till where we can see is this much. So this is optical horizon, but radio horizon is beyond that optical horizon. So the radio horizon is 4/3 of optical horizon. So this space waves ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ direct and the ground reflected waves together is called as the space waves, where very high frequency signals are used for propagation. Now let us see the third type of propagation, what is called as the sky waves. What is this sky waves? These are nothing but the signals that are radiated with the help of an antenna to the uppermost layer of the atmosphere, and from the uppermost layer of the atmosphere either it will be reflected or refracted, and the uppermost layer of that atmosphere will be called as an ionosphere. So for the propagation of this sky waves, this ionosphere, that is the topmost layer of the atmosphere, plays a major role. So these sky waves are nothing but the signals that are radiated by an antenna into the upper atmosphere, and from there it will be either reflected and then it comes back, or refracted. From there it goes into the space. This sky waves uses the uppermost layer of the atmosphere, which is called as the ionosphere. So what is this ionosphere? It is nothing but one of the layer of the atmosphere which will be ionized, that is which will be electrically charged because of the UV rays from the sun. UV rays from the sun anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ, if I am going to consider this as the earth and this as the sun, ಇದನ್ನ ನಾವು sun ಅಂತ ತಗೊಂಡ್ರೆ, because of the UV rays coming from the sun, the uppermost layer of the atmosphere will become ionized. This uppermost layer ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ionized ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ. So ಈ ionized region now we are going to call as an ionosphere, and the signals which is radiated from the antenna andre which is transmitted from the antenna, either will be reflected back to the earth or refracted. So this layer, that is the ionosphere layer, will either reflect back that signal or refract that signal depending upon the frequency of the signal and depending upon what is called as critical angle, critical frequency. There are some of the definitions which we have to consider while transmitting the signals from one place to another place. We are going to study in detail about those definitions in the next session. So, ionosphere plays a very important role in transmitting this sky waves or in propagating this sky waves. This ionosphere is nothing but the uppermost layer of the atmosphere, which is electrically charged because of the UV rays of the sun. Clear? This ionosphere is a relatively thick layer compared to other layers of the atmosphere, and it is invisible. We cannot see that layer, but there is a layer which is electrically charged, and this layer extends from 50 kilometers to 400 kilometers. 50 kilometer in the 400 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ತನಕನೂ ಈ ಲೇಯರು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟೆಂಡ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅರ್ತ್ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಇಂದ 50 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಇನ್ನ ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ದು 400 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ತನಕನೂ ನನಗೆ ionosphere ಇದೆ. So if this is the 50 kilometer from the surface of the earth, and if this is the 400 kilometer from the surface of the earth, then this region will be called as the ionosphere. This is the most thickest layer of the atmosphere. This ionosphere supports medium frequency and high frequency propagation, MF and HF. Medium frequency and high frequency propagation na idu tumbane help ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. And this ionosphere is further divided into three different layers, what is called as D, E and F. D layer, E layer and F layer. This F layer is further divided into F1 layer and F2 layer. D layer is very much close to the earth, so out of this ionospheric region, the first layer which is close to the earth is D, next comes E, next comes F. Since this F is very much close to the earth compared to D and E, this F layer is the most ionized region or the most ionized layer compared to D and E. D and E are not that much ionized as that of F, and D and E layers are present only during the daytime, whereas F layer are present both during the daytime as well as the night time. Let us try to understand in detail about this D, E and F layers. This D layer is having an average thickness of 10 kilometers and it extends at an altitude of 70 kilometer. Altitude 70 kilometer anta helidre from the surface of the earth 70 kilometers ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ up to a thickness of 10 kilometers will be having this D layer, and this is absent during night. It is present only during the daytime, and this reflects very low frequency signals and low frequency waves, whereas it absorbs medium frequency and high frequency signals. It absorbs, whereas it reflects low frequency and very low frequency. What is the meaning of this reflects and absorb anta helidre? If I am going to consider this as the surface of the earth and this as a layer of ionosphere, this D layer, let me consider this itself as a D layer of the ionosphere. It reflects very low frequency and low frequency signals. Andre, if here is a transmitting antenna, then if the signal is projected to the ionosphere, it will reflect that signal. That is low frequency signal matte very low frequency signals na ee thara reflect ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. It absorbs high frequency and medium frequency antandre, if the frequency of the signal is in the medium range or in the high range, then the signal will be refracted, or the ionosphere will absorb that signal and that signal will be escaped into the space. So that is the meaning of this. Very low frequency and low frequency signals will be reflected, whereas the medium frequency and high frequency signals are absorbed. Andre artha. Clear? Now let us see about the E layer, that is the second layer of the ionosphere. This E layer is having a thickness of 25 kilometers and present at an altitude of 100 kilometers, and it is present only during the daytime, and it helps for propagating the medium frequency and a small amount of high frequency signals. So this is E layer which is having a thickness of 25 kilometers, and this E layer will start at a distance of 100 kilometers from the surface of the earth up to 25 kilometers, and it helps in propagating medium frequency as well as partially high frequency signals. That is, those signals will be reflected back to the earth. Now we are going to see the third layer of the atmosphere, or the third layer of the ionosphere, what is called as F layer, which is further divided into F1 layer and F2 layer. This F layer starts from an altitude of 150 kilometers and it extends up to 400 kilometers. This F1 layer will start from an altitude of 200 kilometers and it is having a thickness of 200 kilometers. Even F2 is having a thickness of 200 kilometers. Thickness ಎರಡಕ್ಕೂ same ಇದೆ, F1 and F2, that is 200 kilometers. Whereas this F1 layer is starting from 200 kilometers, whereas this F2 layer is starting from 300 kilometers and it extends up to 400 kilometers. Okay, this F1 layer is called as Kenley Heaviside layer, whereas this is called as the Appleton layer. Both are present during the day as well as the night time. F layer itself is present during the day as well as the night time. So ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಎರಡೂನು F1 and F2, which are the sub layers of this F layer, is present both during the daytime as well as the night time. And this F1 layer partially reflects HF waves, that is high frequency waves, partially reflects HF wave, whereas this F2 layers is very much useful in reflecting the HF waves, and this F2 layer changes its altitude depending upon the season. Season anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ ಡಿಪೆಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಅಪಾನ್ ದ ರೆವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಅರ್ತ್ ಯಾವ ಥರ ರೆವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅದರ ಮೇಲೆ F2 ಲೇಯರ್ದು ಆಲ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್ ಕೂಡ ವೇರಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ 300 ಇಂದ 400 ತನಕ ಏನು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಅದರದ ಆಲ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್ ಮೈಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಐದರ್ 300 ಆರ್ 350, ಈ ಥರ ಬೇರೆ ಥರ ಆಲ್ಟಿಟ್ಯೂಡ್ ಇಂದ ಶುರು ಆಗೋ ಚಾನ್ಸಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್ ಲೇಯರ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಅಟ್ಮಾಸ್ಫಿಯರ್. ಸೊ ಇನ್ ಟುಡೇಸ್ ಸೆಷನ್ we discussed about the different ways of propagating the signal. There are three different ways. One is the ground waves, space waves as well as the sky waves. Ground waves nalli earth itself will be considered as the transmission medium or the transmitting line where the signal will be transmitted along the surface or it is reflected from the earth. Space waves anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ direct waves and the ground reflected waves both together will be called as the space wave. Then the last sky waves anta ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ it uses the uppermost layer of the atmosphere, what is called as ionosphere, in order to reflect back the signals. Ionosphere anta ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ it is a layer of the atmosphere which is electrically charged because of the UV rays from the sun. Ionosphere nalli again it is classified into three different layers, D, E and F. D and E are present only during the daytime, whereas F is present both during the day as well as the night time. We also discussed about the thickness and the altitude and which frequency signals is propagated using the different layers of the ionosphere ಅಂತ ನೋಡಿದ್ವಿ. In the next session we will be discussing about the sky wave propagation ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುವಂತ different criteria or the different parameters which is very much essential in order to transmit the signals from one place to another place. So I will be dealing with these definitions in the next session. Until then, take care. Bye bye.